Hello, you're watching TVP World Talks. I'm Jonasz Rewiński. The European Union has just made a major step towards securing long-term support for war-torn Ukraine, agreeing for an indefinite freeze on Russian sovereign assets. The ultimate objective, freeing them up for a financial arrangement beneficial for Kiev, such as the so-called reparation loan, is still a few miles away. But will the gathering momentum allow the European Union to clear this distance before it is too late? Joining us now is Hugo Dixon, Commentator-at-Large at Reuters. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
It's great to be back with you.
So first of all, can you briefly explain what is this about? Because this is not about solving the problem of Belgium, it's more about solving the problem that the European Union has had so far with Hungary in this regard.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Up till now, the Russian sovereign assets have been frozen 6 months at a time. And what that means is that every 6 months there has been a unanimous decision by the European Union member states to continue the freeze. And every 6 months, Hungary kicks up a fuss. Ultimately, it has always agreed to continue with the freeze, but you never know until the last minute. Now, as the European Union is preparing for this reparations loan, which could be up to 165 billion euros of new money to Ukraine, they don't want, in the middle of what would be, possibly many, many years that loan would be out there, they don't want those Russian assets to be unfrozen. And so what they've done is that they've moved from a 6-month freeze to an indefinite freeze. And they found a clause in the EU treaties which allow them to do that, not with unanimity, but with the qualified majority voting. So that means that Hungary has not been able to block this operation. And the particular clause declares an economic emergency. And the argument is that Russia's invasion of Ukraine has already caused huge economic damage to the European Union. And if Russia got those assets back and could use them to reinforce their military, that would cause even more economic damage to the European Union. And therefore, this emergency situation allows one to move from the normal process of unanimity to the qualified majority voting. As you said in your introduction, this is a very important first step towards the reparations loan, but it is not yet the loan itself.
So now the crucial question is, can the same approach, at least from a legal standpoint, when it comes to the interpretation and application of European law, also be used with regard to the current dispute with Belgium? Since obviously Belgium doesn't really want to let go of these assets because of various reasons. But would you say that perhaps applying pressure by relying on a same interpretation could go a long way towards solving this problem?
I think legally it's a good argument, but diplomatically it's going to be tough to force Belgium to hand over 185 billion euros. That's I can explain how the numbers fit up, but basically that's 185 billion euros that are in Euroclear. To force it to hand over that money against its will is going to be tough from a diplomatic perspective, and actually, even if legally it's entitled to do that. It's different with Hungary because although Hungary can object, it's not as though Hungary can do anything. It can't say, well, we disagree with you and we're going to send the money to Russia because the money isn't in Hungary. Whereas to get the money out of Belgium, they have actually got to persuade Belgium to hand over the money. And therefore, it's going to be tougher to use this legal maneuver, even if it's legally solid. And so I think that the main approach is still to persuade Belgium that its concerns have been adequately dealt with and that it should look at the bigger picture, which is that, frankly, it's not just Poland and the Baltic states which are under threat from Russia if Putin manages to gobble up Ukraine, but the whole of European security is under threat, including Belgium's security. And that is the big picture, as you had in the last segment of your program. You had Mark Rutte, the head of NATO, saying that we still haven't woken up to that threat. And it's absolutely right. And as the Belgian Prime Minister seeks legitimately to say, we've got to share the risks in this reparations loan, it's also incumbent on him to realize that he has to show solidarity when Europe's security is under threat. And you will have seen that Bart de Wever, the Belgian Prime Minister, is coming to London today to see the British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. And if I was the British Prime Minister, I would remind him that Britain has stood in solidarity with Belgium over the decades. You go back to World War I, when Germany invaded Belgium, violating its neutrality. That is what brought Britain into the First World War, to defend little Belgium's solidarity. And so solidarity has to go both ways.
So now, speaking of Britain and how it can actually influence this decision-making process, do you think Sir Keir Starmer could provide some insight into how to deal with these assets? Because we've had an announcement a while ago that Britain is preparing to free up about 10 billion euros worth of frozen Russian assets which are held there to help Ukraine. So do you think that this conversation could potentially bring, if not a breakthrough, then at least a step in the right direction by reassuring Belgium that if Britain could do that, so could the European Union, effectively?
I agree with that, absolutely. And Keir Starmer can say, look, Bart, you say you want solidarity. You say you don't want it just to be Belgium's assets, the Russian assets in Belgium that are used for this reparation loan. You want there to be safety in numbers. And we're with you. We're going to do the same thing. So we're all for one and one for all. That is what we're doing today. And that's what we did in 1914. And that's what we need to do to stand up to the threat from Vladimir Putin. Because if Europe is solid and together, we are much stronger than Russia. The European economies, particularly if you include the UK and Norway, I don't know, we're over 10 times bigger than the Russian economy. And we've got lots more technology. But if we are divided, Vladimir Putin can pick us off one by one. So my message to the Belgian Prime Minister, if I was the British Prime Minister, and sadly I'm not, is all for one and one for all.
Now, this doesn't seem to be the approach that the US administration is taking. Donald Trump has his own ideas for the money, and he is apparently not constrained by any such niceties as Belgium objecting to that. He is suggesting, well, we're going to snatch that money away from the EU and we're going to use it in the way that we see fit under the upcoming arrangement, the upcoming peace deal. What do you make of that? How does America want to use these funds? What is the current version? Because it has been changing.
Yes, I mean, I don't think we've seen the published version, but certainly Donald Trump wants to get hold of these assets. In total, inside the European Union, it's 210 billion euros. I'm sorry that the numbers, they're all correct that I've given you, but I have to explain how they all add up. And also the assets in other European countries, including Britain. And he wants to deploy them, 2/3 to go back to Russia, which would be very damaging, to reward Russia for its war in Ukraine, and 1/3 to Ukraine. And in both cases to be used as part of joint ventures with America, where America gets a cut of the profits, half of the profits, in Ukraine's case. Now, you called it a peace deal that Trump is looking for. From what's been leaked, it is not a peace deal. It is a capitulation deal. It is a deal where Ukraine is forced to hand over territory which it has not lost on the battlefield territory, which is extremely important for its defense because it's part of its fortress line of defenses. And so this is not a good arrangement for Ukraine. Whereas the European Commission plan, and hopefully it will be formally approved by the European Union next week at the European Council, is to use those funds to finance a loan to Ukraine. And Ukraine would use that money for its own defenses. That is designed to put Ukraine into a stronger negotiating position so that Vladimir Putin realizes that he can't win this war the easy way because of either Donald Trump bullying Ukraine or because of Ukraine running out of cash. And then Vladimir Putin will realize that he can't win this war of attrition. And maybe he will come to the negotiating table with more reasonable demands. So instead of a capitulation deal of the sort that Donald Trump has been advocating, you could have a more balanced peace deal that lasts and is better for Ukraine, but also better for European security.
Now, of course, we still don't know all of the details. We don't know what the security guarantees could be and if they could offset those risks related to the territories being either handed over, which of course is bad for Ukraine, or accorded some sort of different status, as the recent reports suggest, some sort of free economic zone, which we don't really know that much about. But I have a different question, because there is one thing that has been consistently controversial about the US plans there. Resuming trade with Russia. I mean, lifting sanctions, potentially, if there is a peace deal, and reintroducing, potentially, the Russian oil and gas into Europe. Now, does it mean that Donald Trump is using Angela Merkel as an inspiration, of all people?
I mean, Donald Trump flips. 1 week he was saying Europe needs to cut off all of the remaining oil and gas imports from Russia immediately. And the next he's saying you need to start buying even more oil and gas from Russia. I mean, what this tells me is that Europe needs to stand on its 2 feet. It needs to show more strategic autonomy. The only way that it is going to be able to stand up to both the bullying from Vladimir Putin and the bullying from Donald Trump is by being stronger. And the first step of that is to make this reparations loan and to show we mean business. But of course, that's not enough. We've got a lot of work to do. As Mark Rutte said, the NATO boss, he said, you know, a lot of European nations still haven't woken up to the danger, and we need to start, the work needs to start now. I mean, if he was actually honest, he would have said the work needed to start years ago. But still, it's not too late. And so we've got to realize that Donald Trump is not Europe's friend. And we need to be strong enough to stand up to him. And hopefully in 3 years' time, we'll find that there's a different man or woman in the White House and we can have a better relationship with America. But we shouldn't be under any delusions. Unless we are strong, we are going to be bullied.
Hugo Dixon was our guest today here on DVP World. Thank you very much for joining us.
Pleasure.
And I'm Jonasz. You're watching DVP World. Please do stay with us.